Hi everyone, welcome to my channel for today's video, which is going to be my annual video, if you like, where I show you my most used sports photography workflow, and that is one that primarily now just includes using Adobe Lightroom. Two reasons I use this workflow, which I will come back to in a minute, but before we get started, I just want to say if you are new to my channel, please feel free to check out all my other videos and even consider subscribing. Pretty much everything I do is around sports photography and football photography, and any videos and tutorials kind of relating to that area of interest. So on to today's video. I'm basically going to do two workflow videos this year. As I said, I've done this video in 2020, I think it was, or 2019. I then did it again last year in 2021. I might have missed 2020. Now, when I say my most used workflow, I say that because I actually have two that I use. Today's one is the easiest, it's the quickest, it's the most straightforward, and it's one I've been using for a number of years now, albeit with some little updates here and there. Today specifically, I will be covering multiple exports because that is something I've kind of begun to use a lot of over the last 12 to 18 months. Now, the other workflow I use, I'm going to release a video on next week, and that is a more common workflow, I guess, if you're a professional sports photographer or you're going to be working for an agency, and it is one I use myself when I'm doing agency work. And what that will include when we get to that one is Photo Mechanic and Adobe Photoshop for doing the edits. Now, so all the tagging, the IPTC metadata, and the culling of images for that workflow will take place in Photo Mechanic, edits in Photoshop. But I will do a video about that, and I'll publish that next week. So if you are looking for that video now, unless you're really keen and you've seen this video in the first few days after I've uploaded it, that other tutorial on the workflow will be over on my channel to see now. Okay, so on to today's video then. And I mentioned before about two reasons why I use this workflow primarily, kind of more often than not. And the reasons are pretty straightforward. Number one is I don't generally, when I'm doing my most common photography job, which is club photographer for Tranmere Rovers, I generally don't have to do any tagging of images. I will shoot the matches or the training, whatever it is, edit those images, drop them into a cloud-based folder on Dropbox, and then that is it. My part in that image is complete. There is no requirement for me to add any of that IPTC metadata. The second reason is because it's really easy and it's really quick and it's really simple and straightforward. As I say, I've used pretty much this workflow, albeit with a couple of tweaks, for so many years now that it is second nature. So sometimes you'll know if you shoot a lot of events, professional or otherwise, sometimes you can have those days or those games or events that things just don't go right. And it's always good to know that my workflow is probably the simplest part of what I have to do. Getting a data connection in order to upload to the cloud-based folders, not always as straightforward, but certainly the import or the ingest and the editing of photos and the exporting them is really straightforward. So with that being said, let's jump in and let's look at this Adobe Lightroom sports photography workflow. So you'll see here on my library in the middle, I've got those that gallery view of all of the images of my last import. What I'm going to need to do here is import some photos that we'll use for the purposes of this tutorial. Now, ordinarily, if you're using Lightroom, if you insert your memory card into your computer, it will automatically trigger the import dialog. So otherwise, you can go to File, you can go to Import, and then it'll give you this look. Now, the reason mine is pretty blank here is, as I said, usually I am inserting a memory card and it'll automatically just find it. But for purposes of this tutorial, I have set somewhere up on my desktop with some demo images in there. I think in here. Now, the reason they're not shown is about 8 images in here. The reason they're not showing is over on the right-hand side here. Can you see it says don't import selected duplicates? That is probably my first point to note here, is that make sure you've got that ticked, especially if you're doing live editing at pitchside or courtside or trackside, whatever that event is you're covering, because by having that on, you don't have to worry about deleting photos off your memory card or every time you've kind of dumped some onto your laptop. You can obviously do that I would forget. And also, if there's a quick attack in the football, counter attack that you're not expecting, or an incident happens, and I haven't had a chance to delete those images, I don't want to waste any time. So by keeping that ticked, I can just carry on shooting. When I put that memory card back on my camera, when I take it out and put it back into the laptop, it is going to look for and only import photos that you haven't already imported previously. So, however, if I untick that, which gives this game away a little bit, so these are 11 photos that I have randomly selected from a previous import. So that is why they were hidden initially, because I've done them. So let me import these. So you click import down on the bottom side, bottom corner even, and you'll see they will now come into the center of your screen here. Now, note at the top that we're in library. So we're in the library tab of Lightroom Classic. Very quick look at the screen setup, and on the left, we've got your different import history. So you'll see there all these dates are imports from when I've imported photos from football matches. You see there's nearly 15,000 there in 2021. And all the different dates that those imports have taken place. In the middle, this is obviously where your photos are, where you can quickly preview them and you can click between them. And you can also use these icons at the bottom here to kind of toggle the view and change how many are on screen at any one time. And this thumbnail slider here will let you get even more on by reducing the size of the thumbnail. I like to keep it kind of two across. On the right hand side, you've just got some basic information that is stored within the photo itself, and as you scroll down, you can have all your keywords set up here if you want to. If you do want to add keywords and tags into the metadata at this point, so you'll see I've got some team names in here that I've used previously. And then if we scroll down, you'll see there is some metadata on the right hand side that you can add in your title and your caption, etc. And you can set up some presets, by the way, for this as well, and we'll perhaps cover that on a different tutorial. So I've imported my photos into Lightroom. And now generally what I do is I'd scroll through very quickly, and when I'm at pitch side during a game, what I'm looking for is the good action shot. So if there hasn't been kind of a goal or a red card or something that is really key to the contest and the story you're telling from that game, then I go down and generally look for some better action shots. You can also use this film strip at the bottom to just jump across to different images. Now this comes into its own when you've got hundreds or thousands of images that you've imported across the bottom. Okay, when you've got an image on, let's say this one here, I want to basically develop it or edit it and then import it. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to click develop once you've selected your photo. So it's got that paler grey outline to it. Click develop, and you'll see you can then see all those editing dials and sliders on the right hand side there. What I like to do, first thing I'll normally do when I drop it in, is I'll just zoom in and check the quality on the image. So this particular game, you'll see from the shadows and what have you on the pitch, there's really strong sunlight, not a cloud in the sky. And so I was having to expose, kind of overexpose the background in this first half, because the players were running towards me and they were completely, or the fronts of them were completely in the shadows. You see, if I zoom in on this guy in this yellow kit here, the front is pretty dark yellow, but you can see straight away just on his shoulder here and on the back of his head where the exposure is a little bit blown out, just because of how harsh that sunlight was. So what I need to do with this, none of this around the outside is of any use to me. It's of no interest. And what I always love to do with sports photography, I think it's the way to get the best out of shots, is I like to crop nice and tight. So I know I've covered this in other videos as well. My two suggestions straight away will be to crop it nice and tight, so you've only got the action shot, and then you'll see by holding the mouse button down, you get that little grid on, and then while you've got the button held in, you can move around just to play with the play with how level it is, and you just use that grid there. And all I've done there, you can see, is match up the grid with this horizontal pitch edge here, so I know that it's straight. If you don't have any horizon lines that you can follow, you can also use what should be vertical structures. So you'll see this stand here. So the edge of the stand could be a vertical structure you could use to kind of straighten that image up. You can also use the goalpost. Beware though, especially if you're shooting from a side angle, a lot of goalposts aren't as vertical as you think they probably should be. So if you've got an uneven pitch, you're going to have a little bit of balancing act to do in terms of straightening your image up. Once you're happy with that, you can just kind of click done or select the crop tool that I've used there. And see, we've tidied that right up in terms of the crop. You could go tighter. I know some photographers who would take it right the way down to more something like this, which is great. However, I'm going to leave a bit more space, and that is because of a watermark that I will be applying at when I export this image. I'll come back to that in just a second. In terms of the edits you might want to do, again, I've covered quite a few tutorials on my channel that talks about quick edits that you can do to quickly improve sports photography and football photography photos. What you could possibly do, I'm going to just do a few edits here that might be a bit OTT and harsh, really just to demo the point, but you could drag the shadows up. You see the sun's that kind of bright behind, it's having very minimal effect, but we'll go with it anyway for purposes of the demo. You could probably put the clarity up a little bit, which actually darkens it, but when you zoom in, it keeps it nice and crisp. And you can play with all these saturations. I've said in another video, I know, but on this saturation slider, don't go mad, because watch what happens if you go mad. It's just crazy colours. So use that very sparingly indeed. Contrast always a nice one to play with. That can sometimes really help your images stand out. And obviously, if you've underexposed or overexposed, you can use this slider here for that as well. So let's say we're happy with that image. What we need to do then is export the image. And to do that, there's a keyboard shortcut depending on which operating system you're using, Mac or Windows, or you can go to File and Export, or Export with Previous. Now, I'm going to come back to this in just a second. We'll do a total run through towards the end, but I just want to kind of say it's at this point that you can cycle through multiple images if you want. And so there's another similar one. Kind of the next frame along from what we've just edited. So again, you do the same, you drag it into the middle, make sure it's level, make sure those two guys are kind of vertically at the right level. Not a nice photo, to be honest. His facial expression isn't great, is it? But there we go. And then there's a couple of players celebrating at the end here, and you can see again the shadows and highlights because of the sun were giving me an absolute nightmare during this game, to be honest. You see it's actually perfectly focused on his cheek, but it's blown out a little bit, and then it's too dark on the other side, so you find yourself kind of lifting the shadows and dropping those highlights just to try and get a decent image. Increase the exposure, and there we go. You can see it starts to look good. There's very quick shortcuts you can do for like a before and after, pre and post your edits if you want to do that. I've got a video, I think it's called Quick Tips for Lightroom or something similar on my channel. Go check it out. I don't have a massive number of videos, so it won't take it too long to find it. Let's move on. So we've done our edits and we're happy with the photos we've got. Now what we need to do is we need to export what you've done. So if you've added metadata, any edits that you've done, anything you've done since you imported these files, they need to essentially be saved. So if you think traditionally you might be working on a Word document, if you make changes, you need to go to File and Save. With Lightroom, if you've edited a photo, you need to go to be able to use that photo as a completed JPEG, if you like. You need to export that out of Lightroom. So you can see, if we just look at this film strip at the bottom, you'll see there's little symbols here on the ones that I've edited. One's kind of a crop one, and one's just general, showing that you've made other edits. So you can see at a glance which ones that I've edited, and by holding the command on Mac or control on Windows and clicking, you can highlight all three together. Okay, so to export, let's just export this one image for now. So we'll go File and Export, and you'll see this export dialog that comes up. Now, I said at the outset that I'd make small changes each kind of year as my workflow progresses, my working style and my working needs progress. And it is in the export area where I made probably the simplest but the biggest advancement in the last year, and it is really, really stupid that I wasn't doing it previously. But there we go. So what that entails basically is when I'm exporting images for Tranmere on a match day for the club that I shoot for, I do two things. I export a high resolution image with no compression, no watermark, just nice high res image straight into a folder, a main match folder for that particular game. What I also do is I export a resized, slightly compressed and watermarked image that the club can use immediately on social media. I export that into a subfolder within that same match folder at the same time. Okay, now previously what I'd do is I'd go up, and as you can see on the left hand side here, I'd have so Sutton was this particular game I've shot most recently, Sutton United. You'd see I'd have Sutton High Res as a preset, and I'd have Sutton Social. But what I'd do, if I just jump out of the export box a second, if you go up to File and you go Export with Preset, you'll see you've got your two presets at the bottom. So on every single image, I was basically, once I'd done the edits, I was going File, Export, Sutton High Res, and then I go back in again, File, Export, Sutton Social. Time consuming, extra clicks and things that I don't need to be doing. It was inefficient. And after doing it for far too long, probably a couple of years, I finally thought, why don't I find out if I can do multiple? And before I'd had a chance to Google it, just cancel that. Before I'd had a chance to even Google it, I'd gone into export, and if you look here, next to the Sutton High Res and Sutton Social, there's a couple of check boxes. And what you do, if you check them both and then export or batch export, which I'll do in a second, it basically does both of those jobs. So it'll export the high res one into the top level folder, and it'll export the compressed, resized, watermarked version into a subfolder. So let me quickly show you the result that I'm aiming for with this. Let me just dive in to see some images, and I'll let's just pick any of these. I'm trying to think where there might be some decent images, but it's irrelevant, I guess, really. So let's go into Forest Green away. No, not a good one because my laptop was broke during that game, so I had a different one. Let's just use the Sutton one. That was most recent. So if I go into Sutton away here and I order by file name, you'll see it's full of high resolution JPEG. So if we click on, there's that image which has been edited, and actually click on the right hand side, or look on the right hand side in the preview, you'll see dimensions and resolution is pretty high. However, if I then go into the social folder, you see this subfolder here, social, what you'll see is all the same images, but it's limited in size. So the dimensions are now 2400 by 1600. And if I open one up, you'll see that the club's watermark that is used on social media, so logo in the top right hand corner, and then this border is being used. Okay, so there's one of the ones we were just editing. So this is from the game. That's how it appeared on social media. So when we go back into Lightroom, what we need to consider is how do we go about setting those up? Well, firstly, if you want to do a watermark as one of your presets, then have that created already. Because in this export dialog, if I quickly go down to watermarking, there's a checkbox, and if I tick that, I've got the watermark. You see all the previous season ones I haven't bothered to clear out in there. If you want to create or edit a watermark, just click Edit Watermarks at this point, and that'll allow you to upload your watermark. Now, the one I am using in that instance you just saw, the preview, that is basically a PNG file that is 2400 by 1600 pixels, and all that is in that image, it's a PNG file, as I said. All that is in it is the logo in the top right hand corner and that white border, and the rest is obviously transparent, so that when that is overlaid as a watermark on the resized image, it looks perfect and all just takes care of itself, as long as it's a landscape image, that is. So how do we go about setting those presets up? I will do a full video on that in due course, but very quickly, in here, you basically have to set up what it is you want to do. So first of all, export location, go to choose. I'm going to go find my watermark demo folder. I've put somewhere. Here we go. Put it in that demo subfolder, and let's also do a social one in here, by the way. There we go. So demo subfolder, let's choose that because this is the high res image, sorry. And you'll see quality, I keep that at 100. No limit on the file size. Resolution stays at 240 pixels per inch. No resizing taking place in terms of the dimensions. All the metadata is maintained, and then I'm going to untick the watermark because I don't want it on this one. And then what you do is you'd add test high res as a preset. You see it's shown up here. And what you can do just to test these, and we'll save by the way, is that every time you click on one, just watch that folder destination. So that changes. So test high res is done. Now what we want to do is we also want to do a test social, just to set up our multiple exports. So I've just changed the file location there to the subfolder. Let's take the quality down to say 36. Resize to fit, let's say width 2400 by, got my 9 and my 0 confused, 2400 by 1600. And I am going to just tick on my watermark file here, and then test social will be my preset. Okay, so what I'll then do is I'll tick that, and I'll tick that. So both of these exports that we've just set up are now created. So if I go batch export, it'll just give you a quick summary of the 2 operations you're about to do. Click export, and then 2 operations in progress in the top left hand corner. Done. So if we jump back to our demo file, so let's go to my desktop, workflow, demo, 2 things. Firstly, in here, this is the high res one we exported, and you'll see dimensions have not been touched, and it is clean as well. There is no watermark on that image. If I just quickly open up to show, so no watermark on it. And then if I go into the social subfolder, you'll see, there you go, the image has been brought down to that size, 2400 by 1600. If we click on it, you'll also see that the club watermark is now on it. So obviously that watermark could be your company, it could be written right across the middle, or wherever you want it to be. It could be a logo, it could be writing, whatever, but you can do that for any watermark as long as you go and create that first. I think Lightroom as well allows you to create a text-based watermark within that edit watermarks section I showed you, but I don't want to get too bogged down in that in this video. So in case you're lost, what I'm now going to show you is in real time what I'm actually doing at pitchside. So let's pretend I've just imported these photos, and I'm scrolling down, and this one of the guy heading the ball is a photo I want to use. So I've quickly come in, imported, I'll go to develop, I'll zoom in, just make sure the quality's there. It's not great on this one, to be honest. There you go, it's cleared up a little actually. So happy with that, that's good. Let's say the game's 0-0 and that's a defender as it is. So what we want to do is we want to give that a nice crop. Now that one might be one that's a little bit looser. 2 reasons. Number 1, you want to kind of show them that they're both off the ground there. Number 2, we still want to leave space for the watermark in our second export. This player being here, this number 15 here, not ideal. We could do a wider crop to keep him in, to be honest, like that. In fact, let's just do that on this occasion. Keep his toes in so we don't chop anything off. Do that. Let's do a couple of edits so we know what we're exporting is the one that we're playing around with here. So I'm going to make it horrendously oversaturated just to so we know it's definitely our image that's exported. And then here's the magic. So I've done my edits, go to File, and just go Export with Previous, and there's a keyboard shortcut here as well you can use. But if you go Export with Previous, because see top left, 2 operations in progress, because the last thing I exported was those 2 different variations of the export, when I go Export with Previous, it uses exactly the same settings. There go the 2 presets we set up, and it will export this photo in the same way. So very quickly, let's just do one more. So here's the edit. Let's just boost the contrast up. We'd straighten it up if there's enough space in the frame. Happy, yeah, good. Export with previous, done. You move on to the next one. And that is basically the speed that you're trying to work at pitchside. You need to be as quick as possible when you're getting these images off. You don't want to miss any of the action either. Let's just do one more. So edit's done, export with previous. Okay, so the end result of that is, if we go back into our folder, is we can see all those images, even though I'm only clicking that export once, they've all come across. So let's go into demo. So you'll see there's our high resolution, unaltered, sorry, not unaltered, dimensions unaltered, totally oversaturated, horrific image that we booted out through the export first. There's the guy we did last, and the other two. And if we go into the social folder, all those images are there again, but this time they've got the watermark on and the dimensions have been brought down to 2400 by 1600. And this image here is a perfect example, by the way, of just why I normally leave a little bit more space on my crops for Tranmere, is because this border can just cut through someone's head or foot or leg if you're not careful. And so that's it. I say they all get dumped ordinarily into Dropbox for me on a match day. And then what I'll usually do when I get home, if it's a home game especially, I'll probably, unless there's a load of late drama, I'll do any photos that are needed immediately for social media. And then I'll go home. I'm normally on the sofa or at my kitchen table with a cold drink. I will go through all of the photos I've taken on match day, which is often, by the way, in the region, depending on how good or bad the game was, anywhere from 1,000 up to normally around 1,500 for playoff finals. In the past, when it went to extra time, I've shot on a day closer to 2,500 photos. So when I talk about the need for speed, to coin a phrase, when you are editing and using that export function and finding all these little shortcuts that can save you time, that is why it is so important, because you are covering an action sport with a massive volume of photos that you need to work with. So it's in your interest to get them edited and sent as quickly as possible. So that's it. That is my Adobe Lightroom sports photography workflow video for 2022. Let me know any comments below. It is really simplistic. It is the lightest touch workflow I think you can have right now. Let me know in the comments if you think this is helpful, if it's similar to what you use, if you use something totally different. Be really interested to know. And also feel free to drop in the comments anything you'd like me to cover in more detail in another video, be it a full-on tutorial, or maybe we can do a Q&A or something at some point. And lastly, check out the next video I drop next week, which will be the more complex workflow of using Photo Mechanic and Adobe Photoshop. Thanks for watching. As I said at the start, I'd love you to subscribe if you are interested in doing so. Otherwise, I will see you again shortly.